As we promised, we are here with our Power Insight series. And today our guest is Captain Raman. Captain Raman is a strategic coach, author, soldier, keynote speaker, and a distinguished fellow at Observer Research Foundation. He has a diverse career which enables him to learn, practice, and teach first principles of organizational dynamics, strategies, transformations, and mindset shift that is need in the dynamic world. Third has served in the Indian Army amid action for 12 years and followed by diverse career in corporates like Mahindra and Reliance. Sir was also handpicked to be the founder CEO of NATGRID post 2611.
Captain Raman has authored a book called Every Man's War, which has been endorsed by government and business leaders both. He has a strong presence in leading publications and platforms like TEDx, Josh, Indian Express, Mint, Wired, and Hindustan Times. He is associated with business schools and government institutions, including Indian School of Business, Duke Corporate Education, Army War College, Indian Institute of Public Administration, and National Defense College. He has delivered keynotes, sessions, and workshops for global audiences across India, UAE, and Singapore. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today for sharing your insights.
Thanks, Anand. Thanks, Suman. Thank you very much.
Sir, we would like to begin today by asking you, you are a mentor and coach to many. But we would like to know, sir, where were your beginnings? Who was your mentor and how did they help mold you and your career?
I think it would be wrong to say that there's only one or two mentors in anybody's life for that matter. So I think every person we come in contact with rubs off a little bit of them on us. We are nothing but a combination of all the experiences of the people whom we have met, learned from sometimes good things, sometimes not so good things. So I think we should the may begin with parents, with the influence of cousins, uncles, aunts, teachers, the Indian Armed Forces, which you have been part of. You meet so many people there who teach their senior subalterns, the commanding officers, company commanders, senior JCOs. I mean, you learn that from everybody. So I don't really see any one individual as a mentor. I think mentorship is a state of mind. If we get that state of mind to keep seeking learning from anybody, then we don't need to have one mentor from whom we are learning everything that we need to know.
Yes, sir.
Nice. Sir, now, how can your view on this, how can adaptability and resilience transform a person's potential and their perception in life? Sir, I'm audible?
Adaptability, resilience, mental robustness, these are all words that very often are thrown around without properly defining what that means. What does adaptability mean? What is the fine line between stubbornness and adaptability, or strong-willed and surrendering? So if a person continues to, like I very often ask this even of people who are appearing, let's say for the SSB exam, you are aware that there are people who have cleared after the 13th attempt, 12th
Right,
attempt,
sir.
14th
Yes.
attempt. Now, trying it for 12 attempts, is that stubbornness? Is that strong-willedness? Or is that, now there will be anecdotal cases of people who have cleared, yes, on the 13th attempt also. But practically speaking, if you have tried 2, 3, 4 times and given it your best, maybe you just don't have it in you. So I think this line between what is resilience and what is stubbornness, and what is practicality versus what is hard-headedness is a thin line that has to be constantly evaluated. And I think the individual is the best judge for that. But having said that, I think people who are adaptable with their skills and with their mindset, if you are a good writer, for example, you can be a good website writer, a good technical writer, a good novelist, a good journalist. So it's a bit like saying that if you work on your fundamentals, which are good, then your ability to adapt is much more. If your fundamental skills are good. So yes, I would recommend that those people who are preparing themselves for the uncertain world of the future, they should look at fundamental skills, fundamental core skills. For example, selling is a fundamental core skill, regardless of which industry you go to. That skill will be, but doing, say, mathematical analytics is a very, very specific skill. A program development or learning a programming code or programming language is a very, very specific skill. It has a limited or at least targeted utility. So I think people who have multiple skills, adaptability comes naturally to them because they can take their skills and develop a new set of tools using the same building blocks.
Right, sir. So we have seen and heard your inspiring leadership lessons from the armed forces. However, what is the one life lesson that you have learned in your corporate career which is of immense value to you?
Many lessons. I think it's not just one lesson. These are two different worlds. As you are
Sir.
aware that in the armed forces, at least at junior levels, maybe at senior levels, at after the junior levels, you don't really have to worry about too much about the financial side of stuff. You're not in it for a business. It's not a business. Uh, Whereas in corporates, every entity, unless you're an NGO is also a business. It also needs to have a revenue and has to find ways of generating that revenue and making returns to the investor, whoever the investor may be. So in a way, these are two different worlds. And while there are lessons of leadership that are fungible, we must not forget that these are two different worlds, and you can't just lift and shift whatever is happening in the armed forces over here and vice versa. I think the importance of understanding the cost of resources, the cost of capital itself, the importance of understanding taking decisions with a financial, an eye to the financial scorecard, realizing that many times you will have to choose between two fundamentally bad decisions, lesser of the two evils. These are all lessons that you learn in different spheres of life, including the corporate world.
Sir, the perception, sir, am I audible?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
The perception of stress and failure is very myopic, and because of which there is a reduction in tolerance for stress and failure. So, sir, what is your insight on this?
There's a lot of new literature and studies that are emerging which show that stress and the strain that is placed on us because of the modern living conditions, they are actually quite high, much, much higher than what we anticipated it to be. So if you actually look at various different vectors, and this is not just important for us, it's also important for our children, especially for those who are entering into the job world or who are in their teenagers. So first, of course, we are living in a very mentally hostile world. We are bombarded with negativity. There's a lot of negativity that is bombarded. Every advertisement reminds us that we are not good enough, we don't look good enough, we don't earn good enough, we are not supposed to be happy because we don't have that product. And this constant bombardment of inadequacy, the constant bombardment of unable to meet the standards which are artificial to begin with. This is one part of the environment. The second part of the environment is an increasing sense of irrelevance that a lot of the workforce will have, especially the young workforce when it goes into the job markets. They will typically be joining large conglomerates where they are going to be just a small peg in the entire cog in the entire machinery, and they'll remain a cog for several years until they attain a certain amount of seniority. So they will have a high degree of irrelevance very soon. The third is that most of their benchmarks, most of the benchmarks of outcome, which is placed on measurement benchmarks, placed on employees, even at a senior level, are very material driven, material focused. So there's a lot more on the amount of productivity improvement, the number of headcount that can be cut, optimization of workforce, reduction of resources. So this is the focus of a lot of people's outcome measurement. So this is very material orientation, and when you do material orientation, then other values also gets compromised. So your value our ability to distribute our mind share amongst different values is like a pie. So when one slice of the pie increases, other slices of the pie will by definition become smaller. So if our focus on materialistic outcome is much more, if we are much more driven by that, then by definition our some other slice, which could be empathy, which could be time with the family, which could be time to live life, those slices will start reducing. So very clearly we are going to be operating in an environment where stress will be of a fairly high level. Now, interestingly, stress doesn't have any absolute benchmark. So, for example, if you like to play the piano and you like playing the piano, then you can play for 3 or 4 hours. But if your job is to play a piano in a say a cheap restaurant where you don't like playing it at all, and that's your job, where you have to play whether people are listening to you or not, or they're drinking and they're making fun of you, you still have to play. It's a very stressful job. So it has got nothing to do with the activity itself. It is how it is contextualized. And now increasingly we have studies to prove that even a small experience, especially if it has taken place in formative years of your development, if that small experience, the small experience is enough to leave a very profound influence on the way our mind behaves. So when you look at all of these things, you realize that stress is actually something that is very much part of our lives. And it doesn't necessarily mean only the very high people in the hierarchy are stressed. Actually, it's incorrect. It's been again found that people who are higher in the hierarchy usually have lesser stress levels because they have certainty about many of their conditions. They have certainty about their financial conditions. They have certainty about agency over their lives, even with the downturn that is coming now after the economy starts. COVID starts affecting it in a much worse way. The very well-to-do, the people who are fairly up there in the corporate hierarchy, they will be okay. Even if they lose their jobs, they're not going to come into the roads. But there'll be millions of people whose EMIs are stuck, whose next month's salary check is in limbo. Now, for these kind of people, stress will be high, even though in absolute terms, you can't make a comparison between an employee who's working in, say, a bank vis-a-vis somebody who's in a battlefield, or someone who's in an operating theater, or someone who's in a high-risk job like a firefighting or whatever. But the stress levels are the same because they are relative. They're not absolute. So to that extent, I think it's incorrect and unfair to make comparisons between one profession to the other profession. All professions have their own stress levels, and the stress levels are absolute in their own professions. They are not relatively more or less than the other. And I think corporate India needs to make that recognition that it's an ailment that affects 1 in 4 people now. And post COVID, my sense is that that number is only going to increase. So we need to understand that resilience of an organization is concomitant to the resilience of its employees, and resilience of employees is concomitant to how well the organization has built the relationships between the employees and everyone else.
Sir, over last 3 decades, sir, how have you seen, I mean, just from this question came in my mind. Over the last 3 decades, how have the perceptions towards success and failure changed?
It's hard to say how it's changed over the last 3 decades, but very clearly, I think 30 years ago, a lot of the benchmarks of success was external benchmark. That's the way I would look at it. So if you were a good student in school, you were good. If you were a mediocre, medium level student, you were a medium level person. If you were bad in studies, you were fundamentally bad. If you did very well in studies, then you would be slated to go into science. And if you went into science, you got engineering or medical seats, you were supposed to be happy. If you got into IIT, you should be happy because only so few people get into IIT. Now, no one really gave a damn whether you liked engineering, didn't like engineering, whether you liked accounts, whether you wanted to become a chartered accountant or not. It was that if you were this good, then this is the slot you fit into. It was almost like a caste system in some sense, in terms of your intellectual slotting, for lack of a better word.
Yes.
I think there was a aura of frugality. Things were in short supply. There was always a shortfall of resources. Tickets were not there. Trains were houseful. Theaters were busy. Internet was slow. Phone connection was hard to come by. So there was generally an environment of frugality. Everywhere there was shortage of resources. Now suddenly, over the next, let's say, last 10 years, a decade, you have a mindset shift of an aura of abundance. There is a mindset of abundance. So things are now available. Wi-Fi is available for free. phone connections you can get easily. Transportation is available for free. Funding is not that difficult as it used to be. Home loans are available. Housing loans, education loans are available. So suddenly you would see from a mindset of frugality, people are moving into a mindset of abundance and a mindset of agency. Now people have a lot more agency over their life. It's very common now to see young people deciding that this is not a profession that's exciting me and I want to change my profession. I meet literally scores of people, as I'm sure you do, who've got a formal education in, say, engineering, and now they are doing creative advertising, or they are in event management company, and they've done something else completely differently. So very clearly, there are people who, or there is an environment which allows individuals to assume much more agency about their lives, especially if you're good.
I think there's a network.
But of problem solving, that people have much stronger role to play in decision making, means a lot of the decisions will now be internal and not so much external.
Right, sir. So leadership is often seen as a certain designation or a position, However, leaders, we have heard you also say this, the leaders are present in all stratas and sections of society. So what is your take on this, and what are the two leadership skills which are essential for anyone?
Oh, so, of course, leadership is there at every level. A person who assumes the responsibility of untangling a traffic jam in the rain down below, he is a leader. For that particular situational awareness, that person is a leader. A woman who takes charge when she sees that three kids are shivering by the side and that obviously seems to be lost, and she takes it on herself to go and ask them, that is leadership. So, leadership is a trait that is not, obviously it's everybody knows that it's not something that is tied down to a particular position or a prerogative of a certain level. It's across the board. The one or two skills which I think I see so much of evidence for it now, that it's a leader must have an extraordinary ability to communicate with people, because without that ability of communication, every other trait that the leader possesses is hidden. It's inside a black box. Nobody knows that. So I think communication is a very strong trait, and the ability to solve problems. That is the second important trait of a leader. Now, I'm not getting into morality, integrity, goodness, and all of that. Those are they don't make a good or a bad leader. They make a good or a bad human being. So nobody can deny that Hitler was not a great leader. He was a great leader. He led half the world. He conquered half the world. Being a corporal, from a corporal to becoming the Führer, nobody can deny that he was not a great leader. So I'm not talking about his humanity. I'm talking about his leadership skills. And in that, the ability to communicate and the ability to solve problems or to spot opportunities where others see only problems. These are, I think, two very important traits of a leader. Morality, of course, is the other part of it. That's the foundation.
So, Amita, you take on, my bandwidth is very low.
Okay. So, sir, another thing which I wanted to know was that, intrinsic motivation is something which everyone has to work very hard on, it takes a lot of effort, especially without any expectation and working from your own side, without any expectation of rewards. How does one be consistent, and, how can they keep themselves motivated continuously?
I think, firstly, if people answered fundamentally what is their intrinsic motivation, truthfully to themselves, they don't have to answer to anybody else, truthfully to themselves, I think it'll be much easier for them to work with that. Because what happens is, a lot of people don't fundamentally answer it to themselves. Now, every individual, every human being has 4 or 5 areas in which they can strive to achieve success or strive to achieve whatever they want. It could be in the area of health, it could be in the area of wealth, it could be in the area of work, it could be in the area of relationship. Now, what do I mean by that? Health doesn't mean just your physical fitness. Health means the kind of work that you want to do. You want to have time for leisure, Do you want to spend time with your children? Do you want to go for your morning tennis or live in an unpolluted city? That all comes into health. The second is wealth. That do you want to earn a lot of money because you want crores and lakhs to act as your buffer? Do you want a monthly salary of X number of lakhs because you believe that my lifestyle requires these many thousand or these many lakhs per month? A work means the kind of work that you want to do. Do you want to do monotonous, drudgery job which doesn't give you any mental sort of challenge but pays well? Or do you want to do something that makes you feel excited and makes you feel that
Sir, your picture, your video is...
contributing to something, making a difference, but doesn't pay well? Mean relationship with your spouse or your family.
Sir, I
Can you
think
hear me?
now we can. I think we lost you for a bit because of the bandwidth issue.
Yeah. So essentially, these are the four quadrants. If you look at it: health, wealth, relationship. If you look at these four quadrants and decide which is, I mean, obviously, it will always be a combination. You need meaningful work, but you also need to make money. But if you decide that out of these four quadrants, if I allocate 10 marks to all four of them, what is the maximum I can get out of 30? Not out of 40, out of 30. What is the maximum I can get? That will force you to prioritize. Now, if your priority is, listen, I want to make money, I want to earn money, and I want to have a kitty with me, then don't do self-deception. Say honestly, okay, I'm in it for the money. I don't give a damn whether the job is drudgery, whether it means really traveling 3 hours in a day, whether it means listening to an idiot of a boss, whether it's working in a hostile work environment. All of that doesn't matter to me because I want to make money. On the other hand, some people say that I want this kind of life, but I want that kind of money. That life doesn't work like that. You can't say that I want 5 features from this product, 7 features from this one, and combine it and make a new product. It doesn't work like that. So I think the first question that people need to answer to themselves is, what do they need out of these four things, which is the top priority for them? Once they understand that, which is, by the way, it's not a very easy thing to do, because typically people will say, "Mere ko sab cheez mein thoda thoda chahiye." It doesn't work like that. You can't get sab cheez ka thoda thoda. You have to decide that if you want more time to live life and enjoy it, then you're not going to be able to work in a city like Mumbai, where you will waste 3 hours a day just in commute, and you will be living typically far away from your place of work, or spending a lot of money in your residence. So you have to make that call. So when you make these set of compromises and arrive at what you truly want, my sense is people will be happy. Unfortunately, what happens is people, they say they want something else, and the dichotomy between the two is usually what creates the frustration and unsettled thinking in their heads.
Yes, sir. Actually, yes. Suman ma'am, will you take the question?
Let me see. Am I
Yes.
audible?
Yes, you are clearly audible. No network
Okay,
issue.
sir.
Yeah.
Okay. So, sir, it is like self-awareness. Though you have covered, self-awareness is a great way to recognize and grow, which you just told us. So, what role has it played in your life journey? Also, after being in a leadership position for 3 decades, how do you ensure that you keep growing as a person, as a leader?
So, of course, as you grow, yeah, I can hear you. As you grow older, you look back at the number of years that you have spent. You look back at the mistakes you have made. You look back and realize that's one of the advantages of getting older, that you can look back and realize the screw ups you have done and really not feel that squeamish about it. You feel squeamish earlier also. Now you don't feel that squeamish. You say, "Okay, yaar, ho jata hai. Everybody makes mistakes. I've also made the mistakes." So I think you understand the depth of the lessons that you otherwise know. You know those lessons, they're taught to you even in kindergarten, but you understand the depth of that lessons as you experience it yourself. So, like for example, let's say, God forbid, something bad happens to any one of us at this point of time. We have lived life long enough to know that everything that happens for the best. Eventually, some good will come out of it. And at some point of time, we will be able to recognize that, ye jo hua tha, iski wajah se wo hua hai. So if this bad thing had not happened, that good thing also would not have happened. But it's only after many years and many instances of experiencing that you feel confident that next time something bad happens, you have that, it's okay, things will be fine. But that's only something that comes by experience. So to tell that to a 25-year-old that don't worry, things will be fine, it's pointless. The person will look at you and say, what do you know? You don't know what I'm going through. So it's something that people have to live through and discover on their own. It's something that you live through in your own life and you discover. So I think one way is to constantly be aware that we are very ignorant. We are very ignorant about things that are changing in life. We are very ignorant about new things that are happening. We are even very ignorant about the things that we think we know, because a lot of the things that we know are not absolutely true. Things keeps changing. You know, what we assume to be the truth is not really the whole truth. So if we are constantly aware that we could be taught, we could be wrong, we could be having stupid biases, we could be looking at things in very short myopic view, I think that will keep us grounded enough to constantly recognize that we need to learn. Now, the moment we start thinking, कि हाँ इसमें 30 साल हो गए, मेरे को ये आता है, I know this well, that's the place I think where we start going wrong, because nobody can say मेरे को ये आता है about anything. Because everything is so deep and so ever changing that nobody can claim that I know about this.
So I'm just going to take one question from the audience, sir. The question is, how did you adapt to learning and unlearning in your transformation journey from army to corporate? This is being posted by someone, Sarah Alpha is the name.
Sarah Alpha, obviously Fauji guy.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so yes, of course, you have to learn and unlearn, and you have to firstly understand that these are two different environments. And I am assuming that this question is coming from somebody who is either doing it, contemplating this change, or is looking and saying that will this be, of course, it will be a challenge. It's a new life. When you came into the forces, it was a new life. Whether you came to NDA or you came to IMA or OTA, it was a completely new world, at least for those who came from a non-Fauji background. So it will be a new world, and you will carry some part of the army with you. Don't be naive in saying कि हाँ जिस दिन मैं uniform उतार दूंगा उस दिन से मैं civilian हो जाऊंगा. You will not. You will still carry that company commander or the CEO or whatever you were in the army. You will carry that with you, and your blood will boil the first time someone will tell you, "Hey, this scooter हटा के उधर रख." You know, you will, shit, how dare you talk to me like that? This is part of life. It's okay. You're moving from one world to the other world. These things will happen, and it's part of the trauma that you're supposed to go through when you go from one world to another world. You will have to unlearn some things, of course, because don't think that whatever you learned in the armed forces, you'll be able to apply that straight away in the private sector. It doesn't work like that. The private sector is a very different environment. In the Indian armed forces, you will not have a problem of 10 Jawans from your battalion quitting and joining the Pakistani army. That doesn't happen. But it happens in the corporate world. All the time it happens, right? Your people will quit and join your competition and all of it happens. So it's a different world. Don't try to blindly apply everything that you think will work over here. Don't be naive and start prescribing, motherhood statements like be better than your men and all of that bullshit that you learned in Ghodpuri or first term or whatever. It doesn't work like that. It's not, life is not as simple as. And remember one thing, that please, every profession, whether it's medicine, management, doctor, any profession, it has its own challenges, it has its own, and I know a lot of very, very capable brothers, sisters, officers from the armed forces who are very, very capable in the army. But that doesn't mean that that capability translates necessarily into another field. So it's a bit like if you're a great officer in the artillery, doesn't mean you'll be a great officer in the AMC. It doesn't work like that. You can't do surgery tomorrow just because you were a great gunner. Similarly, just because you are a great army officer doesn't mean that you will become a good leader in the corporate world automatically. It doesn't work like that. And so my advice would be to make this transition. Firstly, learn a lot, study a lot about the world that you're going to get into. Any officer who believes that they want to make a difference in their career by going into a corporate or whatever, I would strongly recommend they should try and do an MBA, not because it will improve your chances for a job or anything, but it will show you, it will teach you a lot. And have the humility to know that this 2-year MBA doesn't teach you anything beyond just giving you a taste of what the ocean is out there. I know a lot of people who have done that 6 months course from one of these Narsi Munji or IIMs and started kidding themselves that this is as good as a 2-year course of MBA. Don't do that, please. So also my advice would be to spend at least 6 months to a year when you come out with your mouth closed, just watching what is
Yes, sir.
happening, rather than saying कि वो मैं जब squadron उड़ाता था तब मैंने ऐसे किया या मैंने वो IL 76 में वैसे किया. Once in a while, it's nice to speak about it. After some time, it gets very grating to everyone. So my advice would be to make that transition like a good youngster. Keep watching, keep listening, keep learning. Don't start giving obvious answers to problems. I'll give you an example. Let's say some Gora friend of yours comes from abroad, spends 5 days with you in Delhi or Bombay, and turns around, tells you in his accent, you know what? You know, you Indians should build better roads. Now you will look at that guy and you'll say, हमें नहीं पता था क्या? हम 50 साल से यहाँ रह रहे हैं, हमें नहीं पता था कि हमें सड़कें चाहिए. So the point is,
Yes, sir.
you will try to give gyan on something which is so away from your understanding that your answer will look very naive, and that naivety will expose your shallowness. So my recommendation is first 6 months don't even offer any idea that हमारे पलटन में तो ऐसा होता था, आर्मी में तो वैसा. Don't do that because you don't know the ground reality here. Understand the ground reality. After 6 months, get a sense of, oh, so this is how things work here. This is how things happen here, and then start contributing. You will be much more valuable in the new world that you are going to
So very
make your own.
rightly brought out by you, like there is a mismatch of skill set from army to corporate. So what will you recommend? What kind of skill sets the armed officers can develop to transit into the corporate?
So I think the first and foremost skill set that any leader, not just army officers, must have very, very high is the high learnability skill set. Very high learnability. So you have to ask yourself a question that suppose you are given a job offer tomorrow in a completely different organization, let's say retail or pharmaceutical industry. How much time will you take to learn about the industry to say 70% of its proficiency? If it's going to be more than about 90 days, then you're a slow learner. It won't work. You have to be able to learn it much faster. You have to be able to read about 8 to 10 books about that industry. You have to be able to cultivate friends who can give you a 101 premiere on that industry and explain that to you in a matter of like make you sit down and explain that entire industry to you. You must have the ability to learn very quickly. That, to my mind, should be one of the fundamental traits of a leader. The second is you must have the ability to communicate that to others in the simplest manner possible. That's very important. Communication is not about standing in front of a PPT or doing a TED talk. Communication is about taking a complex piece of architecture or a structure or a concept and simplifying it and explaining it in simple terms so that a complete newcomer can understand the whole thing and say, "Ha, mere ko samajh mein aa gaya." That is communication. Now that skill should be developed. So I think these are some fundamental skills, as I said. These are fungible skills. These are core skills. If you learn these core skills, the ability to learn, the ability to teach, the ability to problem solve, these skills will stand in good stead, regardless of where you are making a career switch or which career you are switching from to which one.
Sir, another question from the audience. It says, Captain Raghuraman, you have also spoken about motivating stories from your life experiences. However, have you ever had a situation wherein you had to be motivated from an external source?
Always, all our motivations come from external sources only. Even the stories that I narrate are not necessarily some things that happened to me. Sometimes it's something that happened to a friend of mine or something that I observed somewhere else. So motivating stories don't need to happen to you. Usually motivating stories don't happen to you. They happen to others and you draw lessons from there. And you say that if it can happen to him or if that individual can do this, then why can't I do that as well? I just think that we need to have a sense of optimism to look for the silver linings. I know it's not very easy all the time. Some of us, when we go through certain phases in our life, it becomes much easier to spot the cloud than to see the silver lining. But we just need to have the faith to say that there will be a silver lining and the cloud will pass. So if we have that optimism, my sense is we will be able to find motivational thoughts in pretty much any kind of a situation that we are in. Even if you look at this COVID situation with so many bad things happening all around us, millions of people came out of their way to help people. I met thousands of kids who started some sort of fundraising to feed the migrant labor. So many people
Yes,
who,
sir.
contrary to what we hear, I'm sure many of us also decided to take care of their drivers and their household help and all of that extent. So uh, there is good stuff happening. It's you can find motivating things everywhere if you are in that motivated mindset. That, to my mind, is not a very easy thing. We have to work at it. I agree. We have to work at it on a daily basis.
Sir, from your advice for the people who are transitioning, another question comes is uh, there are two questions about the stereotyping of veteran community and if you see it as a good thing or a bad thing. And what is your advice for veterans on how to showcase individual skills going beyond that stereotype?
So, like any stereotype, stereotypes are good and bad. The stereotype of you being a veteran officer means you don't have to introduce yourself to many people. If you just say I'm ex-army, you automatically get some of the rub-off effect. Not necessarily all of it good, and that's thanks to our own fraternity. Some of them have not been very good brand ambassadors, like any other career, I guess. So, to my mind, I used to actually teach this many years ago in these 6-month courses in IM. I used to teach this framework. So, for whatever it's worth, I'm sharing it now. My sense is broadly the veteran community, when they come out, they will find, and like I said, this is not just from my experience, it's more from my observation also. I left the army in 98, so I've been watching the veterans coming out and making a mark for themselves in all different spheres of corporate life. So this is more of my experience of observation. I think there are 5 broad categories in which veterans are fitted when they come out, or rather slotted. First, of course, being security, because that seems intuitive. If you're from the armed forces or paramilitary forces, then security seems like a natural adjunct. The second is administration, because in many organizations, security and administration is sort of combined, and that also is considered to be a forte. The third is HR. There is a belief in a lot of armed forces veterans that they are good in HR. I want to dispel you that is not a good belief to have. HR, unless you are working in a very small organization, HR is a very specialized task. There are many different facets of HR, LNOD, organization development, compensation and benefits, and many things. And HR units of large organizations are very large. So a lot of veterans who believe that just asking the troops welfare, khana khaya, pani piya, that's enough as HR experience. It is not. So I'm of course oversimplifying, but it is not. HR is a very specialized job. So they should be careful about thinking that they will be good HR people without requiring an education. They will require a complete re-education, and that, to my mind, is true for everything, even security. Remember, security in the corporate world is very different from what it is in the armed forces. And in the armed forces, the mandate of security is to doubt everybody and let only the acceptable in. Whereas in the corporate world, you can't doubt everybody. Then your customers can't get in. So you have to say,
Yes.
assume everybody is okay, and now look for who could be bad. So very different paradigm of security. Also, security comes at a cost in the corporate sector. In the government, security is priceless. It is effectively, there is no cost to security. In the corporate sector, there is. Each time you increase security, the cost of business goes up. So, for example, give you a very simple retail example. In retail, if you put stuff that can be stolen
Hmm.
inside glass cases, it's a great idea from a security head. But if you put stuff inside glass cases, they don't get sold. They don't get bought. People don't
Yes.
buy stuff that you can't touch and feel. So your idea of putting it inside a glass stuff might be great to prevent theft, but it will also stop sales. So
Stop sales.
not a very good idea to begin with. So I think there is re-education needed to be done, whether you go into security or you go into admin or you go into HR. The remaining 2 areas where slotting can happen, or not slotting, but you can find yourself. Lower percentage is operations. Great example is the telecom industry. The telecom industry, as you and I know it, whether it's Jio or Airtel or Vodafone or any one of these companies, is virtually set up by signals officers who left the army. I'm sure you know many of them. I know many of my own postmates were the early founders of the telecom industry. Or even logistics. I know a lot of officers who do very well in logistics, like Safe Express, DHL, Blue Dart, all of these kind of companies. These I would call into the operations space as COO, Chief of Operations. The holy grail is, of course, to hold a P&L responsibility, to hold a CEO's responsibility, where you're responsible for strategy, you're responsible for money, you're responsible for HR. The buck stops at you. You're the commanding officer in some sense. That's the CEO. That is the holy grail, and that does require, for whatever it's worth, it requires a mind, head for numbers. It requires a problem-solving mind. It requires strategic thinking to a certain extent. There are examples of dimensions, but I would strongly recommend that you should have a very clear idea about which one of these five you want to be slotted in. If you have expectations that I'm going to make a huge difference in the world and I want to leave a mark and then go and end up joining security of some manufacturing organization, unlikely that you'll be able to do much beyond reducing headcount and implementing one or two CCTV camera project kind of things. If you desire that I want to be involved in strategy or whatever, it's a steep learning curve, because you'll have to learn about a completely new industry, a completely new business model, all of that before you look at where you place yourself. And I think all of us have some sense of self-awareness. This is a very important point I want to make to the veteran community.
Sir, are you there? Your video has frozen. Hello. I think we.
Sir, he's back. Sir is back. Okay.
Is sir visible to you? I cannot see. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. I think there was a network issue. We lost you for a second there.
It's raining heavily, so.
Pune here also, sir.
So we cannot hear you clearly even now. I think there is some. Hello. Yes, I think you're back now. Hello.
Just give me a sec. Give me 1 sec. I'm just changing.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Can you hear us?
Hi, is that better? I can hear you, yeah.
Slightly. Yes, sir, it's better. So, sir, I know we've taken more time, but we've got two questions from the audience. One is by Sumit Sharma. Individual aspiration versus organizational aspirations. How important is it to synchronize the two? And if it is so important, what are the steps one needs to take to align them?
No, so obviously the textbook answer to this is yes, it should be aligned always. Practical answer is it never will be. The organization's objective is not to make every employee happy. That is not the objective of the organization. The objective of the organization is to make the owner of the organization happy. If it's owned by a family, then to make that family happy. If it's owned by shareholders, then to make their shareholders happy. And shareholders' happiness and employees' happiness may not always be in alignment. So, for example, let's say you are going on an airline, and when the lockdown opens up, and you're approaching the counter, and you see that the person who's servicing your ticket, he's happily talking on the phone to his, he's very happy, but that doesn't translate into happiness for you as a customer. So, as an employee, like in the armed forces, like in any other place, the mission comes first. So the objective of the organization is to make sure that that organization's promise to its shareholders, whether it's in return of investment, in terms of profitability or in terms of service, all of that is like taken care of. Secondly, will be the happiness of the employees. So whether the employees get the salaries that they are hoping, the promotions that they are hoping, those elements come secondary always. Now, the right way is to look for a balance where you have, okay, in a work that I'm doing, out of 100, my aspirations, maybe about 50-55% of my aspirations are met, and the organizational aspirations are also in alignment with that. So that's why I'm saying, so first the exercise you have to do is with yourself to find out what is more important to you. If, for example, it's more important to you that after working for 20-25 years in the army, you now want to have a job which is commensurate with your seniority and with the respect that you think is due to you, it's much better to take over as the head of administration of, say, a boarding school somewhere in the mountains. You will be an important person there. If you work for a consulting firm, regardless of the fact that you have 20 years behind you as a commanding officer in the army, they'll say, "ठीक है यार, the defense का हमारा एक project है, उसमें अभी somebody inputs, go and join that team, and you will be treated like any other team member. So, but you will make much more money, and you will live in a city like Mumbai. So, the question is really for you to first decide for yourself what you want as your posting order. I've written this in one of my blogs in my website. You can check it out, where I've written how to write your own posting order. So if you decide that these are the things that are important to me in terms of priority, you will write your posting order accordingly. But you can't say कि मेरे को कोर कमांडर भी बनना है और गोल्फ का टाइम भी चाहिए और टेंशन भी नहीं चाहिए. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. If you need to have oodles of time at your hand that you want to pursue your hobby, you want to go to DSOI in the evening, then you should have a low profile kind of a appointment in a div or somewhere where you're working as a re-employed officer. I'm just making it up more out of fun. So don't take it personally.
Of course.
But if you are going to be in the line of fire, if each time something goes wrong, your neck is going to be on the line, only then you will make more money. So I think you have to figure out which is the combination you want and then stick to that combination. Yes. Then stick to that. Then accept that with its positives and negatives. Then don't be surprised 5 years down the line when you turn around and say, shit, yeah, I left the army, I left to make more money, I made a lot of money, but now my health is bad and I'm living in a polluted city and my daughter has got asthma. How did that happen? Well, it happened because you made those choices. So I think you have to be clear as to what you want, and then after that, make those choices. My only one or two pieces of advice would be, and this I'm saying more, I normally wouldn't have said this in an open forum, I'm saying it more for brother officers and sisters. Please don't use comparisons of the past for your performance of the future. Please don't do that. You will only make yourself a very sad person, because you'll definitely find somebody out there who was below you in merit in the academy and who is doing much better than you in life today. So there is no point in saying, nobody says that. I mean, Nandan Nilekani's course mate doesn't say that in IIT and look, he's become Nandan Nilekani now. Nobody says that. So please don't say that when you come out. Oh, he was junior now ahead of me. Don't do that. Secondly, don't try to settle for previous job in your new world. I'll explain what that means. Many may be moving out of the forces because we justice for.
Sir, your voice, your picture is frozen, your voice is gone. Suman ma'am, are you there?
My network is also very weak.
No, but you're there. I think sir
Yes, I'm here.
disconnect. Sir is
Mm.
got disconnect.
It's raining heavily here in Pune. I
Yes,
think
yes.
Mumbai
We'll,
also.
we'll just wrap up now, I think.
Mm. That is back.
Sir,
Hello.
yes, sir. We are here.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I think today the net is misbehaving quite a bit.
No problem, sir.
So, sir, finally, we just would like to know you have given us very good insights. Finally, what is your advice for the youth
Youth in general are not related to the armed forces, but generally, sir,
generally? Yeah.
people.
I don't have any advice for the youth. I think they are going through very interesting times.
Yes,
It has a lot of challenges, a lot of changes. They will remember this time as being one of the very exciting times that we all have lived in. My sense is that uh, the kids today, the youth today, definitely know far more than what, at least I can speak for myself, I did at their age. I think this generation is definitely going to be ahead by almost 10 years of previous generations, simply because of the exposure they have had, the changes that they've seen, the kind of access that they've had to both good and bad things that humankind has to offer. And they will also be perhaps faced with the biggest challenges that any generation of people would have had to face. They are faced with challenges of climate change, of likelihood of war, of terrorism, of hunger, of pandemics, of disparity between haves and have-nots, of parochialism, religious intolerance. All of these things they will go through,
yes,
and they will probably have the biggest skin in the game, because at least again speaking of myself and some of the elder people, we've got maybe about another 5, 10, 15, 20 years ahead of us. And if something does go wrong, I think many of us will look back and say, okay, fine, yeah, lived a life, did generally okay. But for a lot of the young people, they have to live in this planet for the next 60, 70 years. If it's a dirty planet, they will have a tough time. They will have to drink dirty water. They will have to breathe dirty air. They will have to reap the seeds that are being sown of parochial short-term gains that some people are doing, that for winning this election or to do that or to get this, I'll, 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 I'll spread fake news or I'll create a hysteria. The youth are the ones who are going to face all of that, because you can spread these things. It's easy to spread like butter. It's impossible to unspread like
unspread.
butter.
Hmm.
You can't
So,
unspread. So they need to be conscious that many of these things they are also going to suffer for it, suffer or benefit from it. So I would recommend that the youth should look at the long term. They should not be misled by the agenda of the elderly, because by definition, the agenda of the elderly will be short term. Because by definition, a person who is 55 or 60 or 65, their horizon is going to be for the next 5 to 10 years. It's unlikely that they are thinking of the next 50 years. Whereas kids who are in their teens, you better watch out for the next 50, 20, 30, 40 years, because if you don't take those decisions intelligently, there will not be 30, 40 years left in many of the areas, whether it's in terms of consumption or the way the society is becoming parochial, or the society is becoming increasingly marginalized. Those are things that I would urge the youth to focus. Remember that your target and your seniors' targets are completely different. So don't be taken by their scorecard. It is not meant to do good for you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today and sharing your insights with us and giving us your time. Uh, we are
Thanks a
Grateful.
ton, and congratulations to both of you, officers,
Thank you, sir.
after leaving the forces, doing well. I'm really proud that
Thank you,
the
sir.
ladies are, sort of giving a good fight to everybody. And I wish you all the very best, and
Thank you, sir. Thank
hope
you
your
so
venture
much.
does exceedingly well.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
sir. Thank
Thanks a
you so
ton.
Right,
much.
sir.
Thank you very much. Thank
Good
you.
evening,
Bye
sir.
bye.
Bye. Bye.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.